In the mountains of Valdoria, where a brutal border war had raged for 3 years, everyone knew the name Butterfingers. It wasn't spoken with respect. Sarah Mitchell had earned that nickname the hard way, dropping magazines during live fire, exercises, fumbling with her scope adjustments under pressure, and watching her hands shake when superior officers evaluated her performance. The elite soldiers at Camp Ridgemont whispered that she was a clerical mistake, someone who'd accidentally been assigned to the Border Defense Unit instead of kitchen duty. They said she'd wash out within weeks, another casualty of a program designed for warriors, not for nervous girls who couldn't keep their equipment steady. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But on a fog-covered morning in November, when enemy forces had surrounded the peace negotiation site, and the fate of 2 nations hung in the balance, Sarah Mitchell would make a shot that historians would later call the most important bullet ever fired. The woman they mocked for her unsteady hands would prove that sometimes the person everyone underestimates is exactly the person everyone needs. Sarah Mitchell stepped off the military transport at Camp Ridgemont with her grandfather's hunting rifle slung across her shoulder and a duffel bag that had seen better decades. The November air bit through her standard-issue jacket as she surveyed the sprawling facility carved into the Valdorian mountainside. Concrete barriers and watchtowers dotted the landscape like ancient sentinels, while beyond the perimeter, the disputed border zone stretched into hostile territory, where enemy patrols moved through forests that had become graveyards. This was the Border Defense Unit, the military's most selective program for long-range reconnaissance specialists. Every soldier here had earned their place through exceptional marksmanship scores and combat readiness evaluations. Sarah had qualified through a bureaucratic fluke, scoring perfectly on written examinations while barely meeting the minimum physical requirements. Her police academy training had been cut short by budget cuts, leaving her with impressive theoretical knowledge but limited field experience. The other recruits moved with the fluid confidence of natural predators. Their equipment gleamed with the latest military technology, advanced scopes that could calculate wind drift automatically, rifles with computerized firing systems that adjusted for atmospheric conditions. Jake Harrison, a third-generation military officer from Texas, carried a precision weapon worth more than Sarah's annual salary. His tactical gear bore the subtle markings of someone who'd grown up around military hardware, every piece perfectly maintained and expertly configured. Sarah's grandfather's rifle looked like a museum artifact by comparison. The walnut stock bore the scars of countless hunting expeditions in the Montana wilderness, where her grandfather had taught her to read wind patterns and the movement of grass and to find her breathing rhythm in the space between heartbeats. The iron sights had no electronic assistance, no range-finding computers, no ballistic calculators. It was a weapon that demanded intimate knowledge of its behavior, requiring the shooter to become part of the rifle rather than simply operating it. As the recruits gathered for initial processing, Sarah noticed how conversations naturally gravitated toward equipment specifications and military pedigrees. Jake dominated the discussions, his voice carrying the casual authority of someone who'd never doubted his place in any room. He'd attended military preparatory schools, participated in junior officer training programs, and carried recommendations from colonels who'd served with his father. His rifle had been custom-built by the same company that supplied special forces units, incorporating technology that could compensate for most shooter errors. Emma Chun, a sharp-eyed lieutenant from California, had brought her own collection of precision instruments, including a portable weather station that could predict wind patterns hours in advance. Danny Walsh, despite being assigned to maintenance duties, carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who understood weapons at a molecular level. These were serious professionals who'd been preparing for this opportunity their entire careers. Sarah found herself studying the faces around her, noting how they evaluated each other's gear and credentials. She was clearly the outlier, the one whose presence required explanation. Her rifle drew curious glances and barely suppressed smirks. When Jake noticed her weapon during the equipment inspection, his expression shifted from curiosity to amusement. The training facility itself reflected the program's philosophy of technological superiority and rapid deployment. Electronic targets could appear at varying distances with split-second timing, simulating the kind of surprise encounters that border conflicts demanded. Computer systems tracked every shot with microscopic precision, generating performance data that could predict a soldier's effectiveness in various combat scenarios. The emphasis was clearly on quick target acquisition and immediate engagement, skills that modern warfare increasingly required. Captain Michael Torres, the primary training officer, conducted the initial briefing with military efficiency. He explained that the Border Defense Unit had been created to address the specific challenges of mountain warfare, where long-range precision could determine the outcome of entire operations. Enemy forces had been using the mountainous terrain to establish observation posts and supply routes that conventional forces couldn't effectively counter. The unit's mission was to identify and eliminate these strategic advantages through superior marksmanship and tactical positioning. Sarah listened carefully as Torres outlined the training schedule and performance expectations. Speed was critical, he emphasized, because border engagements often involved rapidly changing tactical situations where hesitation could be fatal. The program would evaluate recruits based on their ability to acquire targets quickly, adjust for environmental conditions automatically, and maintain consistent accuracy under time pressure. These were exactly the areas where Sarah's methodical approach and vintage equipment would be most disadvantaged. As the briefing concluded and recruits began moving toward their assigned quarters, Sarah felt the weight of expectation settling around her like morning fog. Everyone here belonged, except her, and everyone seemed to understand that fact instinctively. But she also felt something else, a quiet determination that her grandfather had taught her during those early morning hunting expeditions when patience and precision mattered more than speed and technology. The nickname started during Sarah's second day at Camp Ridgemont, though its origins would become the subject of barracks legend long after she'd left the facility. The morning had begun with individual weapon inspections, where each recruit was required to demonstrate their familiarity with their primary firearm. Captain Torres moved methodically down the line, examining equipment with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen every possible configuration of military hardware. Jake Harrison's presentation was flawless. His rifle came apart and reassembled with the smooth precision of a Swiss timepiece, each component sliding into place with barely audible clicks. The computerized scope calibrated itself automatically, displaying atmospheric readings on a small digital screen. When Torres tested the trigger mechanism, it broke cleanly at exactly 2 pounds of pressure, adjusted to Jake's specifications by military armorers who specialized in competition-grade weapons. The inspection took less than 3 minutes, earning an approving nod from the captain. Emma Chun's equipment proved equally impressive, featuring modular components that could be reconfigured for different mission parameters. Her backup systems included redundant sighting mechanisms and emergency communication devices, integrated into the weapon platform itself. Danny Walsh, despite his maintenance assignment, demonstrated an intimate knowledge of ballistic coefficients and ammunition performance characteristics that impressed even the veteran instructors. When Torres reached Sarah's position, the atmosphere shifted subtly. Her grandfather's rifle drew immediate attention, not for its sophistication, but for its apparent antiquity. The wood stock showed generations of careful maintenance with hand-carved checkering that had been darkened by decades of oil and handling. The metal components bore the patina of age but showed no signs of neglect or wear. Every surface had been meticulously maintained, though clearly by hand rather than by precision. Machinery. Torres lifted the rifle with obvious curiosity, examining the manual action and iron sights with the expression of someone encountering a historical artifact. The other recruits gathered closer, their interest piqued by the unusual equipment. Sarah began explaining the rifle's capabilities, detailing how her grandfather had modified the trigger mechanism for consistency and how the iron sights had been carefully adjusted for various ammunition types. Her voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who understood their equipment intimately, but the explanation was interrupted by an unexpected complication. As Sarah attempted to demonstrate the bolt-action mechanism under Torres's scrutiny, her hands betrayed her. The combination of nervous energy and the unfamiliar pressure of performing for an audience caused her fingers to fumble with the bolt handle. Instead of the smooth cycling she'd demonstrated thousands of times in private, the action caught momentarily before releasing with an awkward jerk. The magazine, which should have been secured firmly in place, slipped from her grip and clattered onto the concrete floor with a metallic ring that seemed to echo forever in the sudden silence. Jake's reaction was immediate and devastating. "Looks like we've got ourselves a real Butterfingers here," he announced with the kind of casual cruelty that comes naturally to those who've never experienced genuine failure. The comment drew immediate laughter from several other recruits who recognized an opportunity to establish their own superiority by contrast. The nickname stuck with the persistence of military humor, spreading through the ranks with the efficiency of a well-designed virus. Captain Torres maintained his professional demeanor, but Sarah could see the subtle shift in his evaluation. The fumbled demonstration had confirmed his initial doubts about her presence in the program. When he asked about her previous military experience, her explanation of police academy training and civilian marksmanship competitions seemed increasingly inadequate compared to the combat experience and formal military education of her peers. Torres's questions became more probing, focusing on her qualification scores and the circumstances of her assignment to the unit. The revelation that Sarah had entered the program through competitive examination rather than traditional military channels drew additional scrutiny. While her written scores had been exceptional, demonstrating comprehensive knowledge of ballistic theory and tactical principles, her practical experience was limited to civilian contexts that seemed almost quaint compared to the life-and-death scenarios the unit regularly faced. The other recruits had trained at military academies, participated in combat operations, or emerged from elite special forces programs where precision shooting was just one component of comprehensive warrior training. Jake Harrison's background, by contrast, seemed designed to highlight Sarah's deficiencies. His father had commanded a Marine sniper platoon during 3 combat deployments, and Jake had grown up on military bases where precision shooting was a family tradition. He'd attended the Virginia Military Institute, where he'd captained the rifle team and set records that still stood years later. His recommendations came from general officers who'd known his family for decades, and his assignment to the border defense unit had been specifically requested by commanders who anticipated his rapid advancement through the ranks. Emma Chun's credentials were equally impressive, featuring advanced degrees in physics and engineering that informed her approach to long-range shooting. She understood atmospheric dynamics at a theoretical level that allowed her to predict environmental conditions with scientific precision. Her equipment reflected this knowledge, incorporating sensors and calculating devices that could process variables most shooters learn to estimate through experience. Danny Walsh, though assigned to support duties, had emerged from the Army's most selective technical training programs and possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of weapons systems that made him invaluable to operational planning. As the day progressed, the Butterfingers nickname gained momentum and embellishment. Stories began circulating about Sarah's fumbled equipment demonstration, with each retelling adding new details about her supposed incompetence. Some versions had her dropping multiple components, Others described imaginary malfunctions with her vintage rifle. The truth became less important than the entertainment value, and Sarah found herself becoming a source of amusement for recruits who were dealing with their own stress about the demanding program. The social dynamics of the unit crystallized around this initial incident. Jake Harrison emerged as the unofficial leader among the recruits, his natural charisma and obvious competence attracting followers who recognized the advantages of associating with success. Emma Chen and several others formed their own informal alliance based on shared technical expertise and academic backgrounds. Sarah found herself increasingly isolated, excluded from the casual conversations and study groups that were forming among her peers. During evening briefings, when recruits were encouraged to share relevant experience and ask questions about upcoming training, Sarah's contributions were met with polite tolerance rather than genuine interest. Her insights about wind reading and atmospheric conditions, drawn from years of hunting experience, seemed primitive compared to the technological solutions her peers preferred. When she mentioned techniques her grandfather had taught her about, reading terrain and predicting animal behavior, the information was dismissed as irrelevant to military applications. The psychological impact of this isolation was compounded by the physical demands of the training environment. Camp Ridgemont had been designed to push recruits to their limits, with accommodations that were Spartan by design and schedules that allowed little time for rest or reflection. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sarah found herself questioning her decision to pursue this opportunity, wondering if the bureaucratic accident that had brought her here had been a cruel mistake rather than a fortunate break. Captain Torres's attitude towards Sarah became increasingly skeptical as additional incidents reinforced his initial impression. During equipment maintenance sessions, Sarah's unfamiliarity with modern military hardware became apparent. While she could field strip her grandfather's rifle blindfolded, she struggled with the electronic systems and computerized components that were standard on contemporary weapons. Her questions about basic military procedures revealed gaps in knowledge that her peers took for granted, making her seem even more out of place among the professional soldiers who surrounded her. The Butterfingers nickname evolved beyond simple mockery to become a kind of unofficial designation that defined Sarah's role within the unit's social hierarchy. It appeared on informal duty rosters, was referenced in casual conversations, and eventually became so ubiquitous that some recruits seemed to forget her actual name. The label carried implications beyond simple clumsiness, suggesting someone who was fundamentally unsuited for the precision and reliability that military service demanded. The philosophy that governed Camp Ridgemont was etched into the granite walls of the main training facility in letters 2 feet high: rapid acquisition, immediate engagement, mission success. These words represented more than a motto. They embodied a revolutionary approach to military marksmanship that had been developed specifically for the unique challenges of border warfare. Colonel Patricia Hayes had personally designed the program after analyzing combat data from dozens of international conflicts, identifying speed of engagement as the critical factor that separated successful operations from catastrophic failures. The traditional approach to military sniping, with its emphasis on patience and extended observation, had proven inadequate for the fluid dynamics of modern border disputes. Enemy forces no longer remained stationary for hours while marksmen calculated precise shots. Instead, they moved in rapid tactical formations, appearing briefly at strategic locations before disappearing into terrain that offered countless hiding places. The soldier who could acquire and engage targets within seconds had become exponentially more valuable than the one who could place perfect shots given unlimited time. Captain Torres explained this philosophy during the comprehensive briefing that introduced recruits to the unit's operational doctrine. The presentation featured video footage from actual combat operations, showing how contemporary engagements unfolded with lightning speed. In one sequence, an enemy observation post had been eliminated by a border defense unit team that had identified, acquired, and neutralized the target within 47 seconds of initial detection. Another clip demonstrated how rapid engagement had prevented an enemy supply convoy from reaching the strategic position, disrupting an entire offensive operation through precise timing rather than perfect accuracy. The technological infrastructure at Camp Ridgemont had been specifically designed to support this philosophy. The primary training range featured target systems that could appear and disappear at randomized intervals, forcing shooters to acquire and engage threats within predetermined time windows. Advanced computer systems tracked every aspect of a recruit's performance, measuring not only accuracy but the speed of target identification, scope adjustment time, trigger activation delay, and follow-up shot capability. These metrics were compiled into comprehensive performance profiles that predicted operational effectiveness with mathematical precision. Jake Harrison thrived in this environment like a natural athlete discovering their perfect sport. His equipment had been specifically chosen to maximize rapid engagement capabilities, featuring electronic range-finding systems that could calculate distance and atmospheric corrections automatically. His scope incorporated ballistic computers that adjusted point of impact based on real-time environmental data, effectively eliminating the mental calculations that traditionally consumed precious seconds during target engagement. The rifle's semi-automatic action allowed for immediate follow-up shots without manual bolt manipulation, while specialized ammunition provided consistent performance across varying conditions. During demonstration exercises, Jake's performance consistently impressed instructors and fellow recruits alike. His target acquisition times averaged less than 3 seconds, even under adverse conditions, while his first shot hit probability exceeded 90% at ranges up to 600 meters. More importantly, he could maintain this performance level while transitioning between multiple targets, engaging sequential threats with the mechanical precision of an automated weapons system. His shooting positions flowed naturally from one to another, his breathing controlled automatically, and his trigger manipulation remained consistent regardless of time pressure or environmental stress. Emma Chen approached the rapid engagement philosophy from a different angle, using her technical background to optimize every aspect of the shooting process. She had calculated the mathematical relationships between environmental variables and ballistic performance, creating reference tables that allowed her to make precise adjustments without conscious thought. Her equipment included portable weather monitoring systems that provided real-time atmospheric data, while specialized software on her tablet computed optimal holdover values for various range and condition combinations. This technological approach allowed her to achieve rapid engagement times while maintaining accuracy levels that approached mathematical perfection. The training exercises themselves reflected the program's emphasis on speed and immediate response. Recruits faced scenarios where target exposure lasted mere seconds, simulating the brief opportunities that characterized actual combat engagements. Success required not only accurate shooting, but the ability to process tactical information rapidly, prioritize multiple threats effectively, and execute complex firing solutions under severe time constraints. The psychological pressure was intense and deliberately so, designed to identify recruits who could perform when hesitation meant failure. Sarah's traditional approach to marksmanship seemed increasingly obsolete in this environment. Her grandfather's teaching had emphasized patience, careful observation, and methodical preparation. She had learned to study wind patterns for extended periods, noting subtle changes in vegetation movement and atmospheric conditions that could affect bullet trajectory. Her shooting process involved controlled breathing sequences, deliberate scope adjustments, and trigger manipulation that prioritized absolute precision over speed. These techniques had served her well in hunting contexts where time was unlimited and perfect shot placement was more important than rapid engagement. The disparity became apparent during her first live-fire evaluation on the rapid engagement. Range. The exercise required recruits to engage 5 targets at varying distances within a 60-second time limit, with targets appearing for only 8 to 12 seconds each. Sarah's methodical approach, which would have produced perfect accuracy given unlimited time, proved completely inadequate for the exercise parameters. She managed to engage only 3 targets within the time limit, though her shots achieved precision that would have been impressive under different circumstances. Captain Torres reviewed her performance with barely concealed disappointment. While acknowledging her accuracy on completed engagements, he emphasized that missed opportunities represented mission failures in operational contexts. Enemy targets would not wait for perfect shooting conditions or methodical preparation. The Border Defense Unit needed soldiers who could respond instantly to tactical developments, not marksmen who required extensive setup time for optimal performance. Each target would be visible for a maximum of 15 seconds, though most exposures would be significantly shorter. Scoring would be based on hit probability weighted against engagement time, with bonus points awarded for rapid target acquisition and follow-up shot capability. Failure to achieve minimum performance standards would result in immediate dismissal from the program. The first group of recruits, including Jake Harrison and Emma Chun, began their assessments with the confident efficiency that had characterized their training performance. From the observation tower, instructors and remaining recruits could follow their progress through spotting scopes and electronic monitors that displayed real-time performance data. Jake's movement between positions was fluid and economical, his equipment transitions seamless, and his shooting solutions apparently instinctive. He engaged targets with mechanical precision, rarely requiring more than a single shot to achieve acceptable hit placement. Emma Chun's approach demonstrated the advantages of technological integration and systematic preparation. Her portable weather station provided continuous atmospheric updates that informed scope adjustments, while her ballistic computer calculated optimal holdover values automatically. Her shooting positions were selected based on mathematical analysis rather than intuitive judgment, optimizing sight lines and minimizing environmental interference. The combination of technical expertise and advanced equipment produced performance scores that approached theoretical maximums. Sarah's turn came during the afternoon session, when changing weather conditions had created additional challenges for all remaining recruits. Wind patterns had become more variable, with gusts and thermal updrafts that made ballistic calculations increasingly complex. Visibility had decreased due to scattered clouds that created intermittent shadowing across the range. These conditions particularly disadvantaged shooters who relied on electronic systems that required stable atmospheric inputs for optimal performance. The exercise began poorly for Sarah and continued to deteriorate as environmental challenges accumulated. Her first target appeared at approximately 400 meters during a period of strong crosswind that her iron sights couldn't compensate for automatically. The careful wind-reading techniques her grandfather had taught her required extended observation that consumed precious seconds of the target's brief exposure time. By the time she had calculated the necessary hold-off and acquired a proper sight picture, the target had disappeared without a shot being fired. The second engagement opportunity presented similar difficulties. The target appeared at close range, where her grandfather's rifle should have provided significant advantages over high magnification scopes that were optimized for longer distances. However, Sarah's methodical approach to shooting position establishment and breathing control consumed time that the exercise parameters didn't allow. Her shot was accurate, but fired after the target had already begun its withdrawal sequence. resulting in a marginal hit that scored poorly according to the assessment criteria. Captain Torres observed Sarah's performance through high-powered optics, his expression growing increasingly grim as her limitations became apparent. The radio communication with the control tower carried his running commentary on her tactical decision-making, equipment handling, and shooting execution. His observations were professional but damning, noting her inability to adapt traditional techniques to operational requirements and her fundamental misunderstanding of contemporary military priorities. The third target engagement exposed the most serious flaws in Sarah's approach. Appearing at maximum range during a period of variable wind conditions, the target required rapid ballistic calculations and immediate engagement to achieve a successful hit. Sarah's iron sights provided no electronic assistance for range estimation or atmospheric compensation, forcing her to rely on visual cues and mathematical calculations that consumed critical seconds. Her careful scope adjustments and breathing preparation, while technically correct, were incompatible with the time constraints that defined modern combat engagements. When she finally fired, the shot placement was geometrically perfect for the conditions she had calculated. However, atmospheric changes during her extended preparation had altered the ballistic environment sufficiently to cause a clean miss. The target withdrew without being engaged, adding another failure to her accumulating score. Worse, her extended preparation time had caused her to miss the appearance of a secondary target that more alert shooters would have detected and engaged. Jake Harrison's performance during the same session demonstrated the advantages of rapid engagement methodology. He had successfully engaged all presented targets within optimal time parameters, achieving hit probabilities that met operational standards while maintaining tactical awareness that allowed for multiple threat detection. His equipment had automatically compensated for changing atmospheric conditions, while his training had developed instinctive responses that functioned effectively under stress and time pressure. The final portion of Sarah's assessment occurred during the most challenging environmental conditions of the day. Wind speeds had increased significantly, creating ballistic complications that tested even the most advanced electronic compensation systems. Target exposures had become briefer and more unpredictable, simulating the kind of tactical situations where hesitation invariably led to mission failure. Sarah's traditional approach, with its emphasis on careful preparation and methodical execution, proved completely inadequate for these conditions. Her performance during this concluding phase was characterized by missed opportunities rather than poor shooting. Targets appeared and disappeared while she was still establishing shooting positions or calculating ballistic solutions. Her accuracy on the few engagements she completed remained impressive, but her inability to capitalize on tactical opportunities represented fundamental incompatibility with operational requirements. The assessment concluded with her having engaged fewer than half the presented targets, despite spending the full-time allocation attempting to achieve perfect shots on limited opportunities. The formal scoring session that followed confirmed what everyone had already observed. Sarah's accuracy scores on completed engagements were among the highest recorded during the assessment period, demonstrating technical proficiency that would have been valuable in civilian competition contexts. However, her engagement rate and tactical awareness scores were catastrophically low, indicating inability to function effectively in operational environments where speed of response determined mission outcomes. Captain Torres delivered the results with professional detachment that somehow made the failure more humiliating than open criticism would have been. Sarah's overall score fell far below minimum qualification standards, placing her in the bottom 5% of all recruits who had attempted the assessment. More significantly, her performance profile indicated fundamental characteristics that were incompatible with border defense unit requirements, suggesting that additional training would be unlikely to produce meaningful improvement. The dismissal was immediate and bureaucratically efficient. Sarah received reassignment orders that afternoon, directing her to report to logistics support duties at a supply depot 50 miles from the front lines. The transfer would be effective immediately, with transportation arranged for the following morning. Her personal equipment would be returned to civilian storage, while her training records would be archived with appropriate notations about her unsuitability for precision combat roles. The supply depot at Forward Operating Base Hawthorne existed in a different universe from the elite training facilities at Camp Ridgemont. Located in a valley that had been carved out by military engineers rather than natural forces, the installation sprawled across several acres of concrete and corrugated metal buildings that housed everything from ammunition to medical supplies. The facility served as a critical logistics hub for border operations, but its unglamorous mission attracted little attention from the military hierarchy that celebrated combat units and specialized training programs. Sarah arrived at Hawthorne on a gray December morning that matched her emotional state perfectly. The transport truck that had carried her from Camp Ridgemont also delivered several other reassigned personnel, including soldiers who had been medically downgraded from combat roles and administrative staff who had requested transfers to less demanding positions. The atmosphere was subdued, filled with people who had either failed to meet military expectations or chosen to step away from the challenges that defined elite service. The depot's commanding officer, Major Jennifer Walsh, conducted orientation briefings with the efficient indifference of someone who had processed hundreds of similar transfers. She explained that Forward Operating Base Hawthorne served multiple border units with a wide variety of equipment and supply requirements, from basic ammunition and rations to sophisticated electronic systems and specialized weapons. The work was essential but rarely recognized, requiring attention to detail and organizational skills, rather than the heroic qualities that military culture typically celebrated. Sarah's specific assignment involved managing the small arms maintenance section, where weapons from various units were sent for repair, calibration, and upgrade. The workshop occupied a converted warehouse where dozens of rifles, machine guns, and specialized weapon systems awaited attention from a small team. Technical specialists. Master Sergeant Frank Rodriguez, the senior non-commissioned officer responsible for the facility, had requested Sarah specifically after reviewing her training records and noting her exceptional scores in weapons maintenance and ballistic theory. Rodriguez was a quiet man in his late 40s who had spent most of his military career in support roles that kept sophisticated weapon systems functioning properly. His expertise extended far beyond basic maintenance to encompass ballistic engineering, precision manufacturing techniques, and the kind of detailed technical knowledge that allowed him to improve weapons' performance beyond their original specifications. Unlike the combat instructors at Camp Ridgemont, Rodriguez valued methodical precision over rapid execution, recognizing that careful work in maintenance facilities directly supported operational success in the field. The workshop itself contained equipment that would have impressed civilian gun enthusiasts and military professionals alike. Precision measuring instruments could detect variations in barrel dimensions measured in thousandths of inches, while computer-controlled machinery could manufacture replacement parts to tolerances that exceeded original factory specifications. Electronic testing systems could evaluate trigger mechanisms, scope tracking, and ammunition consistency with scientific precision. The facility represented a convergence of traditional craftsmanship and modern technology that produced results unavailable through conventional military supply channels. Sarah's integration into this environment proceeded with surprising smoothness. Her grandfather's teaching had included extensive instruction in weapons maintenance and modification, skills that translated directly to military applications, despite their civilian origins. She understood the mechanical principles that governed rifle accuracy at an intuitive level, recognizing how minute variations in component fit and finish could affect performance dramatically. More importantly, she approached each weapon as an individual system requiring customized attention rather than standardized processing. The other personnel in the maintenance section represented a diverse collection of military specialists who had found their way to logistic support through various career paths. Technical Sergeant Maria Santos had transferred from aircraft maintenance after developing expertise in precision measurement and quality control systems. Corporal David Kim had been reassigned from field artillery after demonstrating exceptional ability in ballistic calculations and computer programming. Staff Sergeant Robert Chun had been medically restricted from combat duties, but possessed encyclopedic knowledge of weapon systems and ammunition characteristics. The work environment. At Forward Operating Base, Hawthorne operated according to different priorities than the combat units it supported. Success was measured by equipment reliability rather than operational speed, with emphasis on thorough diagnosis and permanent repair rather than quick fixes that might fail under stress. The pace was deliberate and methodical, allowing for the kind of careful attention to detail that Sarah's traditional training had emphasized. For the first time since arriving in the military, she found herself in a context where her natural inclinations were assets rather than liabilities. The weapons that arrived for maintenance told stories of the ongoing border conflict through their condition and wear patterns. Rifles from frontline units showed the effects of constant use and environmental exposure, with mechanisms worn beyond normal tolerances and optical systems degraded by dust and moisture. Specialized weapons from reconnaissance units bore evidence of careful maintenance by users who understood their equipment intimately, requiring only minor adjustments and calibration updates. Equipment from support units often needed extensive work due to inadequate field maintenance and lack of technical expertise among their operators. Sarah's approach to weapons maintenance reflected the methodical precision that had characterized her shooting technique. She began each repair project with comprehensive diagnostic procedures that identified all potential problems rather than addressing only obvious symptoms. Her work progressed systematically through cleaning, measurement, adjustment, and testing, phases that ensured optimal performance when weapons returned to operational use. The quality of her work quickly gained recognition from both supervisory personnel and the units whose equipment she serviced. Rodriguez observed Sarah's work with growing appreciation for her technical abilities and attention to detail. Her civilian background had provided training in precision measurement and mechanical adjustment that complemented her military weapons knowledge effectively. More significantly, her failure at Camp Ridgemont had taught her valuable lessons about the relationship between equipment performance and operational success that informed her maintenance work. She understood how minute variations in weapon characteristics could affect combat effectiveness in ways that might not be apparent during casual use. The maintenance records that Sarah began compiling provided insights into weapons performance that had never been systematically analyzed before. Her detailed documentation revealed patterns of wear and failure that correlated with specific operational conditions and user techniques. Some units consistently returned weapons in better condition than others, suggesting superior training and maintenance procedures. Certain weapon configurations proved more reliable under field conditions, while others required frequent adjustment to maintain acceptable performance standards. These observations led Sarah to develop maintenance procedures that went beyond simple repair and restoration. She began modifying weapons to optimize their performance for specific operational requirements, customizing trigger mechanisms for individual users, and adjusting scope systems for particular environmental conditions. Sarah's approach, however technically proficient, was fundamentally incompatible with contemporary military requirements. The contrast with Jake Harrison's performance was particularly stark. He had engaged all 5 targets within 43 seconds, achieving hit probabilities that met operational standards, while demonstrating the kind of tactical flexibility that modern warfare demanded. His shooting positions had adapted fluidly to changing target locations. His equipment had automatically compensated for varying ranges and conditions, and his mental processing had remained calm and efficient throughout the exercise. This was exactly the kind of performance that the program had been designed to develop and evaluate. The technological aspects of the training program extended beyond individual weapons systems to encompass comprehensive battlefield integration. Recruits learned to coordinate with forward observers who provided real-time target information, communicate with command elements that assigned priority targets, and integrate with support units that could provide additional tactical capabilities. This systematic approach reflected modern military doctrine that emphasized coordinated operations rather than individual heroics. Advanced training exercises incorporated electronic warfare scenarios where traditional communication methods might be compromised, forcing recruits to rely on predetermined protocols and individual judgment. These situations particularly favored soldiers who could process information rapidly and make independent tactical decisions without extended consultation or confirmation. The ability to identify, prioritize, and engage targets based on limited information became a critical skill that separated exceptional performers from merely competent ones. Sarah struggled with these integrated exercises even more than with basic marksmanship evaluations. Her tendency toward careful analysis and methodical decision-making, while valuable in civilian contexts, proved counterproductive when split-second choices determined mission outcomes. She found herself paralyzed by the complexity of tactical variables, unable to process information quickly enough to take advantage of fleeting opportunities. Her performance scores reflected this limitation, placing her consistently in the bottom quartile of recruit rankings, despite her superior accuracy when given adequate time for preparation. The psychological impact of this systematic underperformance was compounded by the reactions of instructors and fellow recruits. Captain Torres's evaluations became increasingly pointed, questioning whether Sarah possessed the fundamental characteristics necessary for operational success. Jake Harrison and other high performers began excluding her from informal training groups and study sessions, apparently viewing her as a liability that might compromise their own advancement prospects. The Butterfingers nickname gained additional meaning, representing not just physical clumsiness, but tactical inadequacy that could prove dangerous in combat situations. The program's emphasis on rapid engagement was reinforced through every aspect of the training environment. Meals were served on compressed schedules that simulated operational constraints. Physical training incorporated time-based challenges that rewarded speed over endurance, and even administrative tasks were evaluated based on completion time rather than thoroughness. This comprehensive approach was designed to develop instinctive responses that would function effectively under the stress and confusion of actual combat operations. As Sarah struggled to adapt to these requirements, she began to understand that her presence at Camp Ridgemont might have been more than a bureaucratic accident. The selection process had apparently failed to identify her fundamental incompatibility with the program's operational philosophy, creating a situation where her continued participation threatened not only her own prospects, but potentially the unit's overall effectiveness. The system's standards were clear, consistent, and apparently non-negotiable, leaving little room for alternative approaches or individual adaptation. The formal qualification assessment at Camp Ridgemont was designed to be the definitive measurement of a recruit's readiness for operational deployment. Scheduled for the 4th week of training, it represented the culmination of everything the Border Defense Unit valued: rapid target acquisition, precision under pressure, and tactical adaptability in dynamic environments. The exercise would determine which recruits advanced to specialized training and which would be reassigned to conventional military roles where their limitations would pose fewer risks to mission success. The qualification range had been constructed to simulate the most challenging aspects of border warfare. Multiple firing positions were scattered across varying elevations, connected by rugged terrain that tested physical conditioning as much as marksmanship skills. Targets could appear at any distance from 200 to 800 meters, requiring instant range estimation and ballistic calculations. Environmental conditions were deliberately adverse, with artificial wind generators and smoke machines creating atmospheric disturbances that demanded real-time compensation. The entire exercise was monitored by computer systems that recorded every shot, movement, and decision with microscopic precision. Sarah approached the qualification assessment with a mixture of determination and barely controlled anxiety. Her performance during preliminary training had been consistently disappointing, earning critiques from instructors who seemed increasingly convinced that her presence in the program was a mistake. The Butterfingers nickname had evolved from simple mockery into a kind of prophetic designation, suggesting that her failure was not just probable but inevitable. Still, she had spent countless hours practicing with her grandfather's rifle, trying to adapt traditional techniques to the program's speed requirements. The night before the assessment, she had carefully prepared her equipment with the methodical attention to detail that her grandfather had instilled during their hunting expeditions. Every component of her rifle was cleaned and inspected. Scope was verified and re-verified for proper alignment, and her ammunition was selected for consistency and quality. Her notebook contained detailed calculations for various range and condition combinations, though she knew that consulting written references during the timed exercise would be impossible. She had committed as much information as possible to memory, hoping that preparation could compensate for the technological advantages her peers enjoyed. Jake Harrison's preparation reflected a completely different philosophy. His equipment had been professionally serviced by military armorers who specialized in competition-grade weapons systems. The electronic components had been updated with the latest software revisions, providing enhanced performance capabilities that hadn't been available when the rifle was initially configured. His support team included technical specialists who monitored atmospheric conditions and provided real-time ballistic data through secure communication channels. This comprehensive approach represented the kind of integrated tactical capability that modern military operations increasingly required. Emma Chun had approached the qualification assessment with characteristic analytical thoroughness. Her preparation included computer modeling of various scenarios based on historical weather data and range configurations, allowing her to anticipate optimal shooting positions and equipment settings for different conditions. She had calculated probability matrices for target appearance patterns, identifying statistically likely sequences that could inform tactical decision-making during the exercise. Her tablet contained reference materials that could be accessed rapidly without compromising shooting positions or time requirements. The assessment began at dawn with a comprehensive briefing from Captain Torres and Master Sergeant Rodriguez. The exercise parameters were explained in detail. Recruits would have 90 minutes to navigate the course and engage designated targets as they appeared.